Today's presentation has to do with understanding the backup contract addendum. The addendum for backup contract, which is TAR Form 1409 or TREC Form 11-7. When is this addendum used? Well, your buyer client wants to put an offer in on a property. When you inform the seller's agent about submitting an offer, they state that they have a signed contract in place, or you notice that the MLS status is other than active. That would be the indication that they already have a signed contract. Now, you submit an offer with the backup contract addendum attached. The seller's agent is obligated to submit all offers to the seller, but there's no guarantee that it will be accepted, your offer will be accepted, or negotiated into a signed contract. Likewise, you represent the seller and have a contract on the property. You receive an offer on the property and you submit it to the seller with the backup contract addendum, of course. As an agent, it's your responsibility to ensure that any subsequent offers are accompanied with that backup contract addendum, or you run the risk of the seller having two contracts on the property, which is going to cause great mischief, grief, anguish, etc. The seller can accept the backup contract as is, reject it totally, or negotiate better terms with the buyer. You want to share the closing date of the first contract with the buyer's agent, and you'll see why when we discuss the form in a moment. Okay, not to state the obvious, but you're going to need the address of the property that you're putting the offer in at the top of the form. Paragraph A informs all parties that the earnest money and the option money must be tendered just as if you were in the first place once the backup contract is signed and returned to you. Okay. It also identifies the first contract by its execution date, which you can ask the seller's agent or have them fill it in when and if they return the backup contract. Make sure you have it. I believe you might also be able to find that on MLS if it's other than active. Paragraph B is for the benefit of the buyer so that they can set a date on which they will withdraw their offer if they are not informed of being in first place. So it states that if the first contract does not terminate on or before date, the backup contract terminates and earnest money will be refunded to buyer. Okay. Now that's only the earnest money. If the buyer elected to do option money and inspections, etc., they're not going to get that money back. That's something that they spent on their behalf. So paragraph B, again, seller must notify buyer if the first contract terminates prior to or on the date in B. All right. So if it was, say, March 1st, it would have to be on March 1st or prior to that. Okay. Now, there's an addendum for seller to do so, and that should definitely be used. You'll see that at the end of this presentation. Now, the last sentence in in paragraph B, can be confusing. Once the seller notifies the buyer that the first contract has terminated and they are now in first place, the effective date of the backup contract is changed to that date of notification. It then becomes on the contract that you have in your hand the amended effective date. All right. Now, paragraph C basically speaks for itself. It just says any amendments or modifications of the first contract will not terminate that first contract. So they could, the people that are in first place can, play back and forth with the seller all day long. It doesn't affect your situation. Now, paragraph D is probably the one that confuses people the most. Okay, but if you read through it simply, this is what it says. It says that if the backup contract was constructed with an option period in paragraph 23, meaning you submit, as a buyer's agent, you submitted a contract or an offer with the addendum, right? And you had an option money in there, an option period, okay? Well, if you did that, then the option period starts when the backup contract is initially signed and executed, just like a normal contract. and then continues on for the amount of days stated in paragraph 23 after the amended effective date. So you can see a buyer has a very, very long option period based on the way this addendum is constructed. This could give the buyer, as it states here, a very long option period in which to terminate the contract. If they do not have an option period purchase in the contract, then this paragraph does not apply. Okay. Paragraph E simply states that the same language is in the contract. Paragraph 23 means time is of the essence. You have to adhere to those time frames. Now, here's a tip. As a buyer's agent, you can save yourself and your client some headaches about trying to recover earnest money if the deal terminates via paragraph B date by submitting the backup offer with zero earnest money and using either the second sentence of paragraph 5 of the contract or special provisions to delay submitting earnest money until you are in first place. This way there won't be a hassle later on. Now, also, if it was me on the buyer's side, I would not do any inspections or anything along that line until I had an amended effective date, because you could spend the money and the time to do your due diligence on the property and then find out you're not in first place and you've spent that money for nothing. So those are two good tips to keep in mind. This is the form that we spoke about earlier in a previous slide. This is how the seller would notify the buyer that he is now in first place. Okay, basically it's seller's name, buyer's name, the contract concerning the property address, and basically it's very simple. It just says, you know, the first contract is terminated. Okay, the contract with the buyer is no longer subject to the contingency, and the effective date of the contract is amended to. That's the date that you're going to be sent that notice. So that now becomes the amended effective date. Okay. That's it for today.